This weekend post, you've got questions and I've got answers. It's the Q&A episode. Hi everybody, I'm Scott Davenport and welcome to In Post. This week's a Q&A episode. You've been sending in your questions and it's been great. I just really love getting the questions. It makes me think about my photography, and I'm hoping that my answers are helping out with your photography, and then we all get better together, which is kind of the whole point. So if you have a question, you can contact me through my website, or you can leave a comment here on the video, and I'll turn the answer around to your question in a day or two, and in a later Q&A episode, your question might be featured. Speaking of which, if you're sending in a question, usually I can assign your first name from the message, but if you can also let me know where you are. I always find it a little more interesting to introduce a question to say it's Jack from Texas as opposed to Jill from Earth. When I don't know where Ann is, you're going to be from Earth. I think that's a pretty safe bet. So let's get into the questions. Jude asked if he could save a mask in ON1 layers as a template. And the short answer is no. And I was trying to think of, why would I be wanting to have a mask as a template? And maybe it's you've done a mask of, I don't know, the shape of a tree or something, and you're wanting to blend that with a completely different image months from now. So you can't save a mask as a template, but what you can do is if you've done masking work on some type of template-like image, let's say a tree, and you want to use that on a different photo, you can open multiple documents in ON1 layers and then be able to copy and paste masks between those documents. So that would be a way to accomplish what you're after, but the short answer is no, you can't save a mask as a template. You can copy and paste all day long. Both Frank from Germany and Tom from California asked about color banding in photos and what can we do about it. So if you don't know what color banding is, you most often see it in very uniform colors or portions of a photo. So imagine a landscape photo on a very clear blue sky type day. And if you look closely in the blue sky where maybe at the horizon it's brighter, and then as you rise up to the edge of your frame, it gets to a darker blue. And instead of it being a very smooth, seamless gradient, you see kind of stripes all the way through that, almost like a rainbow of shades of blue. That's color banding. Now there's a few things that can cause color banding. Most commonly, it's working in a smaller color space or a smaller bit depth, like if you're working in 8-bit, and there are just so many tones of blue, and 8 bits can't represent all of them. So one thing to do is try to use 16-bit as far along in your workflow as you possibly can. Usually at the end where we're exporting something for use on the web, we're doing sRGB, it's going to be an 8-bit file. But if you can postpone that as long as possible, you can reduce or eliminate color banding. A second thing that can be done is adding noise to the image. Noise will kind of scatter things around. And if you add noise to those areas, blend it in an overlay mode or a soft light or something like that, that can help to reduce the banding that's visible. And there's actually a really interesting old school approach to it that it's kind of maybe a third way to do things, but it's in the realm of adding noise. And it's a Photoshop trick, adding scatter noise and doing some interesting blending modes. I'm going to put a link in the bottom of the video to this article/video that's I think it was on F-Stoppers. It's kind of a clip from someone teaching a workshop. So skip to about 10 minutes into it, and it describes the technique I'm talking about. But that's one more thing that we can do to cut down on color banding. Russ in the UK asked a question about applying textures and having it only applied to portions of an image and not everything. So he's got a photo of a flower and he wants to apply a texture but not really impact the flower itself. So I have a video on the site about using textures with photos, and there's the blending modes, of course, that really kind of make the texture play nice with your image. But then if you want to eliminate the texture from certain aspects of your image, you're going to do some type of masking. I think in one case I may have used a luminosity mask, but that's really dependent on the image. So a luminosity mask isn't something special or magical for textures. the masking is driven by what type of image you have. So in this case, let's imagine it's a flower on a gray or a black background. It'd be much simpler to just select one of the masking tools, like in Photoshop, using just a typical masking brush with edge detection on, or in ON1, using the quick mask and sweeping around everything except the flower. Now you can do that on your photo itself and then copy that mask and apply it to your texture layer. Probably invert it at that point so it would only be showing on your background. That texture will only be applied in the background. So masking is the way to accomplish that. What types of masks you use is really going to be dependent on the image that you have. Another question on textures from Paul, and he's asking in ON1, how do I fit the texture to the size of my image? Now, textures sometimes come in smaller than our more modern cameras, where we're doing 24, 36, 40 plus megapixels, and you load the texture and it looks like this tiny box inside your big frame. So the quickest way is in ON1 layers. There is the transform tool. I think it's the first tool at the top of the tool well. And in the toolbar options, there will be a four-headed arrow, and it's called Fill Canvas. So if your texture layer is selected, you click that, and it will expand the texture to be the size of the canvas. Now, the canvas is normally the size of whatever the first photo that you loaded in. If you're loading in multiple photos into different layers, whatever the first photo you loaded in becomes your canvas size. So that's the way to do it, and it's okay that the texture gets stretched out and a little bit warped and is not as crisp, because usually we're blending it in with something else, and the perfect detail that's in a texture file doesn't necessarily have to be there when we're doing the blending. So short of it being like a 1024 square that you're trying to expand out to cover a 40 megapixel file, don't worry too much about the expansion and maintaining detail. Our last question is from Tim in Canada, and he asked another question about Photo Suite 9. He did a crop and then later on went back into that photo in Photo Suite 9 and said, how come I can't change the crop? Okay, the short answer is that crops are not part of the smart layer feature that's in ON1. That just doesn't apply. So it's the smart layers are more for the other modules, enhance, in Photo Suite 9, black and white, effects, where you could re-edit things. Once you've done a crop, that's it. The crop is done. You can, of course, crop smaller again, but you won't be able to undo that crop and regain whatever you had cropped away. So if you're not certain of your crop, you can do your cropping toward the end in something like Capture One, Aperture, Lightroom, where it's non-destructive. But that is why you can't grow the crop after you've saved it from ON1. That's one of the things that's not re-editable. The tip of the week is to avoid color banding by working in 16-bit as long as you possibly can through your workflow. If you're still having color banding issues, after that point you are looking at some type of masking and blending, usually adding noise to the areas that have the banding and mixing that in a blending mode of overlay or soft light or so forth. And again, I'll put a link into this video for this cool technique in Photoshop about using a scatter pattern to generate some noise that works well for color banding. That does it for this week in Post. Hope you've enjoyed it, and if you've got questions, please go ahead and send them in. You can contact me right through my website. And until next week, I'm Scott Davenport, and happy shooting.